Big data may be just another overused buzzword, but storing, sharing, protecting, and recovering big data is a big deal to companies, big or small. Barracuda Networks offers powerful, affordable, yet easy-to-implement solutions for data protection and disaster recovery, email archiving, file sharing, and e-signing, all designed to protect big data and simplify IT. For an online demo or to try any of our storage solutions risk-free for 30 days, visit barracuda.com/bigdata.
ESPN Radio. This is the Thundering Herd Podcast.
I know, sort of tough for me this morning. Michael Keaton did not win Best Actor. Not going to lie, at the very pit of my stomach, I am struggling this morning. Birdman did win, though. Julianne Moore won. J.K. Simmons won. Patricia Arquette won. I was mostly happy. Michael Keaton did not win. I'm 50-50 whether I can get through the show today. Very sad day for me. Great American cinematic star hosed by the Oscar committee. And for the record, can you cut the musical acts down? I think it takes forever. Cut the musical acts, and nobody cares about best sound editing. Come on. It's a television show, not an industry party. Larry was good in the editing room. Nobody cares. I mean, seriously, it's an American television show. Cut the musical acts and get rid of editing guy. Sheesh. Thing lasts forever. They gave that one award out for, supporting actor. You had to wait 6 hours, 11:30, to get the rest of the good awards. Fresh, hot sports tape. Jeez. It just takes forever. I mean, there's some things you can't get rid of in Hollywood. The narcissism. I mean, it's just going to be political. It's going to be narcissistic. Just cut the hours. It's like I say about baseball. You can't make baseball fast. Just cut the season. You're never going to make the game fast. It's not going to be 2 hours, 25 minutes. Guys stepping in, guys stepping out, pitching changes, throw to first. You're limited on how much you can speed up baseball. You can't mess with the pace of the sport. Just cut the season from an insane number of games to just an absurd number. All right. More on that later, because I'm really shaken up about it. So, I'm going to go out on a limb here this morning. You know what the old saying is, you got to go out on a limb, Stanzik. That's where all the fruit is in life. Cleveland Cavaliers and LeBron are going to win the NBA championship. It is official this morning. Now they've got Kendrick Perkins with Mozgov, with Shumpert, with LeBron, with Love, with Kyrie, with, regrettably, J.R. Smith. They're going to win the title. And that's my prediction. Not just the East, they're going to win the title. They now have the requisite size needed to be able to beat teams. They had to get more size. Varejao got hurt. They got Mozgov. Now they got Perkins. They've got it all. They're going to win the title. And they're going to win the title because LeBron James, much to the chagrin of 90% of this audience, there are 10% who had it right, recruits players. Yes, he recruited Kendrick Perkins, called him on the phone. He's done it with Ray Allen. He's done it with various players. Derrick Rose is too cool to do that. Melo's too irrelevant, and Kobe's too stubborn. But if you go to the 2013 Cavs roster, it's just Kyrie, Tristan Thompson, who LeBron and he share the same agent, and Dellavedova. I mean, this is not just moving furniture around. It is a total rebuild. It is a total rebuild engineered by the general manager and LeBron James getting on the phone. And for the record, once you win the titles, you own the story. You win the war, you get to write the history books. Nobody goes back and say, Joe Montana did have Jerry Rice. Peyton Manning did hit. You win the titles, nobody gives a rip. And LeBron always knew that. LeBron always knew that once he won the titles in Miami, nobody was going to go on and on about D. Wade and Chris Bosh because he would leave Miami and they now stink. It was LeBron winning the titles. We get so caught up in that stuff. Oh, but you know what I find very interesting about building championship teams? We're okay if executives make trades. We don't like the player, often the black player, to have any power, and he engineers the trades. That bothers us. That's teaming up. But if an executive does it, we don't have a problem. Danny Ainge does it, gets KG, gets Ray Allen. We're okay with it. Nobody knocks Paul Pierce for that. But if the player engineers it, which should be, we should be complimenting the player who isn't too cool like Derrick Rose, or too stubborn like Kobe, or too irrelevant like Melo, who gets on the phones like, brother, love to have you here. Love to have you here. And it's very funny about this. It is so obvious that in 2015, this is the way to build championship teams. You need several players. You can't do it alone. Yet Kobe Bryant was on the Grantland Basketball Hour yesterday, and he's just too stubborn. It's just not, he can't do it.
It just depends on what your philosophy is. Like, I'm not sitting here saying my philosophy is the right way. It's my way. This is how I choose to do it. You know, some people may agree with it, some people may not. Is it hurting me right now? Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is who I am.
Yeah. Kobe, you're not even a playoff team anymore. You were with Gasol. You were with Shaq. Got to stop turning off people. Got to start turning them on in Hollywood. It's all about working in collaboration. If you're a star like Tom Hanks and somebody offers you a role, the first thing you say is, who are my writers? Who is the director? Who is the producer? I want to work with better people. In music, who's my producer? Everything in music, in fact, in all of their sports. Tom Brady gets mad when he loses people like Wes Welker. Peyton Manning wanted to go to Denver because they had more good players. But in the NBA, there are these stars, they get diluted, and hey, I'm not getting on the phone. Are you out of your mind? Derrick Rose is too cool, Melo's too irrelevant, and Kobe's too stubborn. I mean, isn't it all about content? Isn't it all about wins? I want as many people I can get on this radio show that make the show better. It's about the content. It's about the wins in sports. I mean, in Hollywood, would you rather be like Kobe, a star in a dud, or more of a accent piece in something that won last night in Hollywood? To me, it is so obvious. LeBron got crucified for creating this great cast. It's what Spielberg does. It's what Jay-Z does. It's what everybody does in music. It's what everybody does in business. Apple wants the best engineers. But in the NBA, for some NBA stars, it's just not cool. You do realize Jerry Rice won an MVP in the Super Bowl with Joe Montana. We don't think less of Joe Montana. He won 3 MVPs. Rice won 1. We don't think less of him. Do we think less of Brady because Gronk was healthy this year and he won? You win the title, you write the story. LeBron won 2, he writes the story. His team now, go look at that roster now. That's a loaded team now. You go look at that roster, not only to last year, the day he joined the Cavs until today. They've got it all. I don't think Golden State can match up physically up front size-wise now with them. I think Atlanta is going to be a really interesting test for them. I don't think Chicago will now. They've done it. They've got the size. They've got LeBron. They've got the perimeter defense. They got the perimeter offense. They have the depth. I really don't get it. I don't get this whole I'm afraid to collaborate. I don't get it. Heard brought to you by Regis. New way to work, 1-800-OFFICES, 1-800-OFFICES. That was the big thing. Remember with LeBron? Oh, he couldn't win it alone. You do realize Magic had Jabbar and Worthy. Michael Jordan had Pippen and Rodman and Phil Jackson and Steve Kerr, the best shooter in the league at the time. Bird had McHale. You don't like that the player engineers it, but those front offices engineered it. Nobody's winning alone. Even Brady's only won Super Bowls when he's had a much better defense. Tom's never won it with a bad defense. Peyton's Super Bowl win, he had his best defense. Nobody's doing it alone. Maybe it happened in the 50s or the 60s. It's not happening alone anymore.
All right, Colin, just for the record, missing piece, Kendrick Perkins.
No, I have felt this over the last couple of weeks. But Tristan Thompson, Mozgov, Kendrick Perkins, now they have a rotation of bigs. LeBron can stay up. It really is. It's the complete piece. They've got a big. They've got a backup big. They're going to be tougher. I would love for them to have a Kawhi Leonard, but now you're getting greedy. They could have another good perimeter defender, but what have they won? 13 of 15 games? They're going to, right now, they'd face Washington first round. By the way, don't get those John Wall emails much anymore. That's going to be a quick series.
Colin Cowherd. The Thundering Herd Podcast.
My guys, they just don't understand what it's like to be a performer in America. They're all over the pressure that guys like me face on a daily basis. Neil Patrick Harris did a great job last night. His open was unbelievable. He's literally he's the perfect combination for Hollywood. He's musically gifted. He's funny. He's gay. He's handsome. He's fit. He's an American, and he's a former child star. Check, 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 check. And he's likable. And these guys are all over, and they're like, well, his jokes weren't that funny. His first 10 minutes was the best opening ever, and that's what he does. And then the rest of it, it's all in the hands of, like joke writers. It's not the performer. It's the room. Everybody almost bombs in that room. It's like being a quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Tom Brady would struggle there. It's the vibe, the culture in the room. You're making fun of Hollywood right in front of Hollywood. So you have like these narcissistic people who are just deluded, and you're making jokes about them. It is an impossible room. You guys do not understand the pressure to perform. John here's on the Ellen was amazing last year, but Ellen is a comedian, so her open was okay, but her jokes during the show were really good because that's what she does. He's a musically gifted Tony Award winner. His open was unbelievable. And then the rest of it, he's just reading jokes from people. So she was built for that last year. His open's the best open ever. But that room is why Letterman bombed. That room is why so many guys do that, so many women do that, and it just doesn't work. It's not the comedian. They're all brilliant. Ellen's brilliant. Neil Patrick Harris, Letterman. They're all brilliant. That room stinks. It's like the White House dinner. You know, we have a thing in our business called Upfronts, and it's I'm not going to get into the specifics, but basically it's just like a promotional tour for new shows. And I had to do it a few years ago. It's the worst room I've ever been in. You can't be funny. Everybody's stiff. It's executives. It's critics. It's an awful room. It's not fun. They should have alcohol. They should lighten it up. You feel like you're a police suspect because you can't see through the lights. You can't see the audience. It's awful. And it's like, aren't you trying to promote these shows and be fun? Well, then go ask comedians and musicians how to create a stage. It's antiseptic. It's awful. So it's just sometimes it's not about the person. It's about the room. So I thought Neil Patrick Harris, I think he's brilliant. I think he checks all the boxes. The other thing I saw this weekend, and as you know, if you've listened to the show for any extent of time, I used to live in Vegas, still love it. And when I got out of college, I went to Vegas, and boxing was, it was just really significant in America. You had Mike Tyson, Sugar Ray Leonard, Hagler Hearns. And I not that I grew up loving boxing, but I fell in love with the sport. And like American cities, like sports, things evolve. Things go from popular to less popular. Galveston, Texas used to be bigger than Dallas. That Astoria, Oregon was bigger than San Francisco 100 years ago. Milwaukee was more vibrant than Miami. Detroit was bigger than almost any city outside of New York, L.A., Chicago in the country. Things evolve. So does sports. Baseball's not as popular now. NFL's more popular. College football more popular. Bowling nobody watches. Boxing has essentially died. Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao are going to fight May 2nd. It is the last fight I'll ever really deeply emotionally care about. Now, they're both past their prime, especially Pacquiao, so Mayweather should win this fight. They're both in their upper 30s. But you know what? You can last 45 minutes of boxing in your upper 30s. It's going to be an all-timer. I'll take Mayweather to win the fight. It's going to shatter every revenue record in boxing history. I talked to a couple of people this weekend, and because I still have a few connections in boxing, it's going to hit it out of the park. But it is, I got to tell you, and I've said this before, and I had this conversation the other day with somebody, a journalist, Wally Matthews, I think was on the show. There is nothing bigger when boxing was great. As somebody who's gone to these sporting events, I've been to everything except the Kentucky Derby. Nothing compares to boxing. Final Fours, Super Bowls, NBA Finals, nothing compares. When Vegas was on fire, and New York had some fights and LA did, but when Vegas and Atlantic City, but when Vegas was rocking, this Mayweather-Pacquiao, you'd get like 2 of these a year. It was the best thing I've ever gone to. It is electric. It was from all the beautiful people, sexual and electric, and there was violence, and there was stars, and there was gambling, and there was danger, and there was, it was like the most beautiful people and the most beautiful. It was a cocktail party with a sporting event right in the middle of it, and it was dangerous, and there was a little regulated violence, and it was beautiful, and it was enigmatic, and it was wild, and this is the last great one to me. If you can get a ticket to that, baby, that is the last great fight deeply in this country that most of us, especially over 40, will really care about. And it's the only sporting event I've ever gone to in my life. Boxing's the only sporting event I've ever gone to where I get nervous. I'm just watching it. And it's hard to explain, but when Tyson would come through the ring, I don't get nervous watching football games. You get a pit in your stomach. Maybe it's the violence. Maybe it was Tyson. But I watched fights, and you got as nervous. Like, I would be sitting there sweating, going, here, because in boxing it can end in 1 second. With Tyson, it can end in one left hook. This will be great. That is very rarely in this day and age do I say, after all these years, I got to get to that. Now, that I would pay to see. That I would pay to see. I would pay top dollar to see that fight.
So you're going to do the pay-per-view and we're all coming over?
I'll pay for the pay-per-view, but I'm going to the fight. You guys can come to my grotto and watch it on my TV. I'll pay for it. I'm going to go to the fight. I have to. When is it, May 2nd?
Same day as the Kentucky Derby.
Well, horses or this. Come on, it's not going to be tough. Nothing against the Kentucky Derby. Sam, you're in the herd on ESPN Radio.
Yeah, how you doing, sir?
Good. Go ahead.
I think it lost some of its luster because Pacquiao got knocked out by a guy that Mayweather dominated twice. So I can't see the big draw, you know?
It's going to shatter every pay-per-view record. It won't even be close. It will blow through every record. Mayweather's never lost. This is Pacquiao's probably last fight. It could be Mayweather's last fight. Mayweather's never lost. Pound for pound, is he going to be the greatest ever? And you know what? Let's be honest about this. George Foreman was an old fart. He came back and America couldn't quit watching. It's not just about your record. George Foreman came back and people love boxing. It was just so poorly run. MMA was created. The NFL's bigger. College football is. We get our violence and our tough guys in other areas. But in the end, what really killed boxing was poorly run. Didn't have a commissioner. Certainly not one with any power. And it was up to promoters, and they just, it was a money grab.
You're in the herd. The Thundering Herd Podcast.
Sal Powell called it last week the NFL Convention. It's called the NFL Combine, and Chris Mortensen is joining us. Mort, when was the first Combine you went to, and compare it to what it is now, if you could?
It was actually the first one in '87 here in Indianapolis. It had been in New Orleans, I think, the year before. What it was, I think, and I ran into a coach who was actually there at the time, and Bill Polian was too, by the way. And I think there were 3 to 5 media guys who there weren't credentials issued, by the way. There was no event, and the RCA Dome, or whatever dome it was called at the time, not the current Lucas Oil Stadium, we just kind of hung out at the hotels where these guys are staying, and we kind of wait for them to come back and just hang and gab with them, It was more networking than it was anything else, and you started to kind of prep for the draft. Now, over 1,000 media credentials were issued for this event. And, we're really not allowed inside the stadium. We're on the concourse around the stadium, but what's great is you still have access to a lot of coaches, team executives, and yes, the prospective players that are here. There were over 300 of those.
All right. Let's get to the things that people are talking about and you're talking about in your sources. Winston versus Mariota dominated the talks. Both did well. Why aren't you sold on Jameis as the top pick?
Well, listen, I think Greg Bedard, who writes for Peter King's Monday Morning Quarterback site, and Greg's really good. He wrote something that I've been thinking. Lovie Smith has been so out front on Jameis Winston that we actually can go back and have a history of Lovie Smith saying things publicly, selling things publicly that turned out to be a total 180 from what they actually did. So there's a suspicious red flag there, okay? And that's not the question Lovie's integrity. It's because you're allowed to deceive during this process to maybe generate business. Tony Dungy and Lovie Smith know each other well. I mean, I know Tony likes Jameis Winston, but there's still a thought that maybe you shouldn't have him that close to Tallahassee. Maybe it'd be better for him. But I would say this, he threw extremely well. It does bother some people, bothers me, that he had to drop 17 pounds in a hurry just to get to 231.
Yep.
That's a red flag. And by the way, he's got long legs, so that fat goes to his belly. He admitted, by the way, I like to eat when I'm not around, when I'm not in training mode. Mariota came here. I think he had more to prove because obviously coming out of the system, everybody says Jameis is more pro ready. No question, Jameis really throws every ball beautifully, great deep touch. But Mariota, I think, threw the ball extremely well. His footwork is already better. You talk about pro concepts versus Oregon spread. those things are all legitimate debates. But, you talk to Florida State, Jimbo Fisher does a great job with Jameis Winston, but he's still really only running about 4 concepts. It's going to be a transition for either player, and then it gets down to some of the character things that teams will have to dig into, and we know that Mariota is going to come out way ahead on that part.
Okay, and Ndamukong Suh, who is one of those free agents I like. I wouldn't pay him a fortune, but if you couldn't have that kind of presence on the interior to clog up running lanes, Ndamukong Suh, Lions, what do your sources say? Where's he go?
Well, if you wanted him, you're going to pay him a fortune. I mean, it's going to be J.J. Watt money and a little bit more than that. But here's the thing about it, though. The guy has a force because he's never on the ground, Colin. This guy has great balance. He's a former guy who played soccer, and he takes up 2 people and allows others to shine. The Lions have been expressing publicly for some while they're very confident they're going to get him signed. I'm sensing he has a chance to reach free agency. If you have a chance to reach free agency on March 10th, your chances as a team of keeping that player are really tough because then it becomes a bidding war.
I'm going to throw a team out to you. You tell me if I'm crazy. Patriots.
I think I won't. I would never call you crazy. Okay, I'll call you crazy.
Is it because they're too close to the cap already?
Well, yeah, just because of the cap and the money. I just said it's going to take more than the $100 million that got J.J. Watt under contract.
So he's going to go to a bad team, is what you're telling me.
Well, as he said, he'll make a business decision. Although he wants to stay in Detroit. I mean, a team that won 11 games last year. But I don't know that means it'll be a bad team. What if we end up going to Seattle? What would you say then? I would say
put him back in the Super Bowl. That's what I'd say right there.
So I don't know where he's going, but I do know if he gets to free agency, then it generally goes to the highest bidder.
All right, Cowboys, are they going to commit to Des Bryant or do the franchise tag? What do you think?
I think they probably franchise tag him, but there's a formula there to work off the next 2 years franchise numbers, which will be like $27 million over the next 2 years, and maybe you add a couple years and protect yourself for anything that you fear that could happen off the field. And so I think I'll call it 60-40 that he is franchised, but there's no chance that he won't be a Cowboy.
Tom Coughlin extension with the Giants. Make any sense to you? It's a long time not making the postseason.
And that's the discussion. I will also say they had some pretty weak drafts. They got just to continue to build in the trenches. Don't mention the age. If you've ever met him, you ever been around him, you'd be embarrassed by him in terms of his energy, his mind, all those things. As he says, it'll probably be a 1-year extension, but he doesn't care. Walter Alston, the old Dodger manager, worked on a 1-year contract for more than 20 years with the old Brooklyn/LA Dodgers.
So Coughlin doesn't care about that?
No, it's not a big deal to him, but the Giants feel like it's just generally a good idea to have another year on there if necessary.
Well, it's funny about the combine thing is, everything grows. It's growing in popularity. Bill Parcells got burned on Pat White, so he decided, I'm going to go with my board set before I go. Do you think, it seemed like about 10 years ago, Mike Mamula, all the hype, do you think now people look at the combine more realistically?
Well, I think for the most part, they always had. Pat White, that's a great example. That's when the old, the Wildcat had just come into it, and now you said, okay, what's an element you can add? Well, not only have a running guy, but have a guy who can actually throw it. Well, that turned out just not to be prudent. But for the most part, the Mike Mamulas are not going to happen. They do trust the tape. If for some reason, like the TCU linebacker, his name escapes me, he runs a 4.9, but on tape he's a great football player. It'll just make you be more diligent in going back to the game tape. Ultimately, the game tape and your character background checks will determine your draft viability.
Did you go to that big steakhouse in Indy yet? Like 4 times?
It's funny because everybody goes to it, but I don't. I'm not going to say it's a bit of a cliche, but I think there are one good thing about Indianapolis is plenty of good restaurants around.
All right. I'm just checking in on you. I worry about your culinary experience as well as your career, Mort.
I could use an advisor in all matters.
All right. Thanks, Mort.
Want more of the Herd? The Thundering Herd Podcast.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
ESPN Radio. This is the Thundering Herd Podcast.
You want your Tom Brady and your Drew Brees and your basketball star to get on the phone and team up with other stars. Peyton Manning could have chosen anybody. He had 7-8 teams after him. He went to Denver because they had the best offensive line and targets. Of course. Do I think less of Peyton Manning? Why would I think less of Peyton Manning that he went to the team that fit him best? But I'm supposed to think less of LeBron because he teams up with people? It's just the dumbest thing in the world. So today is Uncle Ronaldo is laying it all out there with my NBA predictions. A little music. If the Western Conference playoffs started today, #1 Golden State, Oklahoma City. I worry about the Warriors' size, and the Thunder just added size. I'd take the Warriors uncomfortably close. I don't like their interior. Portland against the Clippers. Clippers don't play enough defense for me. I think Portland has a chance to get to the NBA Finals. They added Aaron Aflalo to their bench. Portland's got a lot of guys that can fill it up. If Batum's hitting and Matthews and Aflalo and Aldridge, Portland's nasty. I think they beat the Clippers, and I think they run through them. Memphis, a 2 seed against San Antonio. I'm going to go Memphis here. I think San Antonio's too old. I think there's a line, and they've crossed it. And then Houston, Dallas is my upset. I'm going to take the 6-seeded Dallas Mavericks. In fact, I have the Mavericks. I think they play Memphis next. I have the Mavericks beating Memphis. So I would have Dallas. I'm going to go Portland. I'm such a Warrior fan. I am. I think I'd go Portland and Dallas in the Western Conference playoffs. Portland is, I'm telling you, dude, they've got a lot of guys that can score, and they play good enough defense. I'm going to go Dallas, Portland in the Western Conference Finals. Over in the East, I'd take Chicago over Milwaukee, but kind of interesting. Raptors smoke the Heat. Cleveland, Washington, John Wall has a game or two that's fun, but Cleveland goes through that. I'm not going to watch 1 second of the Hawks and Brooklyn Nets, so I take Atlanta to win. I'm sorry, I think that team, I'm not into it. I'm not into that at all. Everybody in this league loves the whole Atlanta Hawks story. Not into it. It's not into it at all. Oh, boy, here's another one. Here's another guy critiquing. Okay, Matthew, you don't like stars leaving their teams.
It's not that I don't like stars. I believe that you shouldn't leave your team like that. It's not right.
Why?
You shouldn't say, we can't win a championship. Let me go build another championship team. Kobe Bryant in 2006 had a chance to leave. He said, no, I'm going to stay and build. Michael Jordan had a chance to leave. He stayed. You don't run away from it. You take it. Like Pat Riley said when they lost the finals last year. Champions lose. You just got to get up and try again.
Jabbar, Wilt, Barkley, Shaq, Gasol, everybody. Brett Favre left. Why would you ever say no to opportunity and live in this 1940 paradigm of you've got to be loyal? No, you've got to be mobile. That's how our parents live, Matthew. If you can team with better engineers, then get the hell and go to Apple. What is this? What's the value of staying in a cruddy team or a cruddy business? Your kids don't go to better schools. You don't get to heaven in another loftier condo. You get no value out of staying and playing with a Kobe Bryant team that you can't watch.
To your legacy.
It doesn't mean anything. Michael Jordan left and played in Washington. Nobody gives a rip. Nobody talks about Washington. Nobody cares. Joe Namath, he's a Jet. Nobody cares. When LeBron James, nobody cares now that anybody teamed up. Matthew, he won. Is Dirk Nowitzki better than LeBron because he stayed in Dallas? He's had 7-8 years. He didn't make the playoffs. I think you're living in a different world. This whole thing about it means more. Means more to who? Kobe now is on a team that's going to win 25 games. Well, that's awful. I mean, if Carmelo won a title with the Knicks, do I think less of him? I don't understand. The two things I don't get fans say is it just means more to your legacy. No, it doesn't. Michael Jordan's legacy is better than Larry Bird's. Bird played with one team. Jordan went to the Wizards. His legacy doesn't matter to your legacy. Joe Montana went to the Kansas City Chiefs. Has it dinged his legacy? Not at all. Until this last Super Bowl, Joe Montana was considered the best quarterback ever. He played in Kansas City at the end. Doesn't do anything to your legacy. The other thing I don't get is when fans say, hey, I'm a true fan. What the hell does that mean? I mean, like I go to all the games. You shouldn't. You have the power. If your team goes into the tank and your owner's a nut job, don't go to the games. Have leverage. Stop paying. You wouldn't go to a restaurant that stinks. If a restaurant went downhill, you wouldn't go to it. If your team stinks, don't go to the games. That is your way to have power. You need to be conditionally loyal outside of your kids to everything in life. Conditionally loyal. I'll be as loyal as the loyalty you show me. But if you're a Knicks fan, one of the problems with the Knicks fans, they go to games. That place is always sold out and they're unwatchable. So Dolan's like, what do I care? People still show up. What do I care? You don't have much power as a fan. When you have it, exhibit it. Oh, boy. Here come the Hawk fans. Togba, go ahead, bud. You're in the herd. Scold me. Go ahead.
Yeah, what's your beef with Atlanta?
No stars. Pass it really well. They got all this depth. That doesn't work in the playoffs. You need stars. Depth is overrated in the playoffs. You know, all the stuff about playing, regular season basketball is not the playoffs. It's a different sport entirely.
It's happened before, though. Look at the Dallas. I mean, not Dallas. Detroit from a couple of years ago with Ben Wallace and Rip Hamilton, et cetera, et cetera.
You're taking the outlier and making a case. In the last 32 years, there's been one team, and by the way, they went into the finals against the Lakers as a huge dog. They were a 5-1 dog in Vegas, but the Lakers fell apart because they had chemistry issues between Malone, Shaq, and Kobe. One team in 32 years, the Pistons did it, and now everybody's like, yeah, see? Yes, you can win the presidency if you're not very attractive. Probably. It's possible, but it helps if you're good looking because we're in a telegenic era. It helps to be attractive. Where do you think Hillary Rodham Clinton's gone? Where do you think she's gone for the last month? Where'd she go? You ever notice that? Where'd she go? You want to know where she's been? To the doctor. The gym. Where do you think she went? Stylist. Because she's going to run for president. Where do you think she's gone? So she doesn't look as tired and as weathered and as, where do you think she went for the last month? She's gone. Little nip, little tuck, little stylist. That's the game. Yeah. Yeah, there's work being done out back. So, I mean, this whole, every guy is like, every single guy is like, what about the Pistons? What about them? It's like a complete exception, which proves the rule. That doesn't mean anything. David, you're in the herd. Go ahead.
Hey, Colin, love the show, man. I think if you look at the Hawks, to me, they're built a lot like the San Antonio Spurs. Budenholzer is from Popovich's coaching tree. They got a good underrated point guard in Teague. He kind of reminds me of Tony Parker. They've drafted well. Al Horford is a lot like Tim Duncan. He's very underrated. I think, to me, they're more like the Spurs and the Pistons. I think they've got a future for a few years. And I think it's a great story. I mean, they've got unstable ownership. They got a front office mess with Danny Ferry. Appreciate you taking my call, and I love the show, man.
Well, I think you're right on one count. I think Teague and Horford, are a poor man's Parker and Duncan. I think you're right. I think Teague's a very, very electric player, and Horford's one of the more underrated guys in this league. Those are your best players, and those are B-plus guys in this league. They're good players. They have A-minus nights, but they're B-plus players. But it's funny. He said they remind me of the Spurs. Nobody outside of San Antonio ever wants to watch the Spurs. I mean, am I wrong? Every time the Spurs are in a final, unless like LeBron or somebody's with them, they don't get any ratings. Now, I respect what they do, but if they're a lot like the Spurs, and I get the Spurs and the Hawks, you don't like watching the Spurs, and they've been great for 10 years. I mean, the Spurs are the only dynasty in sport nobody likes to watch. So that's my knock on them. I don't think they're exciting and riveting, and Bill Simmons has fallen for this, and Bill loves the NBA. Regular season's one thing. Postseason's another. I don't care about your depth in the postseason. You play your 6 guys, that's fine. I care about your stars. Do you have veterans? Are you good at the free throw line, hopefully? Are you good in crisis? Can you hit a 3? Can you D up situationally? In a regular season, teams are not evenly rested, and depth can be a big advantage. And let's be honest now, in the NBA, a lot of these veteran guys, they're just waiting for the playoffs because they know their legacy is going to be framed on the postseason. So a lot of these guys, even like LeBron and Westbrook, and they pull it off and they wait for the playoffs, which is, I don't blame them. It's what you should.
Putting style in black T-shirts. It's Colin Cowherd, the Thundering Herd podcast.
By the way, the most amazing story of the weekend is not that Birdman, Michael Keaton got hosed, or the Combine stuff. There's a cat. The world's oldest cat. There's a 29-year-old cat. There's a cat in America that just turned 29 years old. So I asked Vince to look up, because I always thought dogs were 7 years. Every year for a human is 7 years for a dog. Like a 7-year-old dog, 7 times 7 is 49. A 7-year-old dog's a 49-year-old dog. So how does it work in cat years?
They say the first year of a cat's life is 15 years equivalent.
Okay.
Then add 10 years for the second year of life.
Okay.
And 4 years for every cat year after that.
So the first two, it'd be 25 years old of the first 2 years. And then it's 4 after that.
Correct.
So 27 times 4, 28, 8, 10. Good God, it's like a 140-year-old cat. Jesus.
Dan found online the oldest cat on record is 38 years old.
No, that's ridiculous.
It was, obviously.
Yeah.
38 years old in 2005, the equivalent of 168 years. God bless Wikipedia.
A 168-year-old cat? Holy moly. So there's a cat out there right now that's about 150. That's an amazing story to me. You know, we got this new dog. You guys are going to laugh at me. So Bugsy, our French bulldog, died, passed away, and real sad. I mean, it was really part of the family. And so, you know, my wife does this all the time. She doesn't ask me, you know, never asks me anything. Just comes home and she's got a big sofa in the middle of the room or something. So I get home and she's like, I go for a drive today. I'm like, where are you going? Cooperstown, New York. I'm like, it's a snowstorm. It's 4 hours away. I got to do something really important. I'm like, oh, brother. So at least she didn't come home with a Mercedes. So she came home with a dog, and it's an egg McMuffin with legs. It's about that big. So this thing is just crazy. First thing we do every morning, you get up, we put it in the shower, and it pees. You can't. It's not dependable. It's not dependable going to the bathroom. So we had to just put it in the shower, and it goes like in 3 seconds. It goes in, boom. Then I take a shower, wash it out. That's the first thing. The second thing is the first week it couldn't get up to the bed and couldn't get down. We put it in a cage, and the thing went just apoplectic. It went crazy. It refused to be in the cage. It's a cage-free pet. It's like, I don't like this cage. It went nuts. So I could hear it upstairs. Upstairs, downstairs, you could hear the dog. So I bring it up in the bed. So wife leaves yesterday, and I have the dog with me, and I'm writing my book, and I'm finishing up a couple of chapters, and it's just sitting next to me. And every time I left the bed and go to the bathroom, go downstairs to get something, dog freaks out and follows me everywhere. And it can follow me down the stairs. When I would come back up the stairs, it can't get on the bed without me. So I started torturing it just for fun. It would freak out. So I would go to the bed, and it would be like, can't get up. And it's an excitable dog. So I'd start to make noise like I was having a great time on the bed. I'd be like, yo, Def Jam, woo, party time, we're having it. And the dog would freak out. The dog was like just barking like crazy, like, what's going on the bed? I'm like, ow, things are happening up here, awesome. And the dog was freaking out. And then I thought, wow, that's terribly cruel. And the dog would back up, to try to figure out what I was doing on top of the bed. And I was doing nothing. And so I was just torture for like 6 hours as I was writing. I'd go downstairs, get a muffin, come back up, do the game with the dog, the freak show Def Jam party, and the dog would go crazy. And it's this big, by the way. And I'm not joking to you. It fits. It's like this big. It's an Egg McMuffin with legs. That's what it is.
You realize you're breaking every cardinal rule of dog training with this.
Why?
You're not doing the crate training.
What's that?
Leaving him in the crate and barking.
I know, no. And
you're having him pee in the shower.
Yeah. Well, I do. What's the difference? I don't understand what the big deal is.
Is he going to hop in there when he gets older?
Well, it's not my responsibility to train the dog. It's a dog. I'm not asking it to do jumping jacks and make the eggs in the morning. It's just don't poop on the carpet. I don't give a rip. I don't need a trained dog. It's not military or law enforcement. How much training do I need for the dog? Don't bite people and to do your business in a box. Am I wrong on that? Am I?
I don't know, man. You got to take the last dog to a dog whisperer. So
no, my wife did that. She went kooky on that whole thing. Yeah, she went sideways on that. I don't want a super trained dog. Just know where to do your business.
You got to find some common ground here. You're 0. You got to get somewhere in the middle. The dog shouldn't be peeing in the shower.
Well, no, it's just at this point in his life. This is just this is the root. Yeah, he is. He's not a bomb-sniffing dog here. I'm not asking him to create commerce for the family. Just, you guys have him all, people want him all worked out and trained. He's not a big lab. Like he can knock over stuff. He's this big, even if he was undisciplined.
And the audience should know, I mean, you've said it before what the dog's name is.
Chewy Baton. I didn't name him.
Sounds a little self-entitled. I don't know.
He's not Lassie, people. He's just this big, okay? He's a Tootsie Roll. It doesn't matter. ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. More independent agents sell it than any other brand. Find an agent at Progressive.com. That's Progressive. I probably should have gone with a bigger dog. But it wasn't my call. She drove to Cooperstown. I thought she was going to the Baseball Hall of Fame. I'm like, oh, she cares about Joe Torre and Johnny Bench. I had no idea my wife cared about Pete Rose. I mean, she's like going to Cooperstown. I'm like, I don't know. Late in life, some people get, interested in things. She's like, oh, she cares about Duke Snider. She comes back with this thing. Good God.
They didn't have dogs in Connecticut?
Yeah. That's what my ex-wife said. She's like, they don't have a dog in this state? What? That's weird.
Technology gone bad. Gone bad. This is the Thundering Herd podcast.
You guys see that story that that Mike Rice, remember the guy at Rutgers, the coach at Rutgers, who they found tape of him throwing balls at people, and he got kicked out of a high school game for being belligerent. You just got to get it under control, man. I'll tell you, one of the most surprising things when you go to in Connecticut, where I live, it's not as intense. It's more of an academic state. But you go to some of these sporting events with these kids, man. I went to a hockey game this weekend. I know. A high school. No, it was actually impressive. I got talked into going to a hockey game, and it's one of these prep schools that has, like, really good hockey. They've got, like, 12 guys in the NHL. I was shocked. The quality of skating. I was shocked by it. You can't believe it's not a hoity-toity school. Well, it is kind of a hoity-toity school. Yeah, they have hockey. It is. So they have a wall. They have like a bunch of L.A. Kings and a bunch of great players, And so I went and watched it. I could not believe the level of stick handling by kids. It was real. You know how much hockey I watched this weekend? Plus, it was like what was the anniversary? 30-year anniversary of Miracle on Ice or something on Sunday. So I watched the Miracles of Men, which was the Russian interpretation of it. It was unbelievable. Again, 30 for 30s, they're all good. There have been about 5 that have been, like Pablo Escobar, the 2 Escobars, out of this world. This thing was unbelievable. It's called Miracles of Men. It's a history lesson. You get the perspective of the Russian men's team. I was trying to explain it to my wife. I'm like, it's unbelievable. They had all these great players who came over to the NHL. A few years later, they ended up in Detroit and they won the Stanley Cup. The only thing I could equate it to, the Miracle on Ice, is a college basketball, you put together a bunch of college basketball players and they beat the NBA champions. That's the only thing you can equate it to. To literally taking an all-star team, a college basketball all-star team, and they beat the NBA champions. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? It would be just absolutely absurd. That's what happened. I mean, Herb Brooks was a coach at the University of Minnesota, and he gets these bunch of Micah Ruzioni guys. People don't understand how dominant that Russian team was. They beat Canada like a year later, 8-1 in the World Championships. They had beaten a team before the USA 12-3. I mean, and they went back and they talked to these guys, and they were like, we didn't even think about it. It was like we just dominated everybody. But it was funny. There was a perfect storm. The night before, I never knew this, the night before, some Russian figure skaters, women, had won medals. Party time with the hockey players. Yeah, a little vodka, a little champagne. So also, it was a perfect convergence here. The Russian team had beaten like a week or a couple of weeks earlier the United States 10-3 at Madison Square Garden. Super cocky. And then they go to Lake Placid. It was a perfect storm. They win again, opening game, like 12-3. They get the accommodations in the Olympic Village, and I guess for the Russian hockey team, they were awful. Then the night before, the Russian women win some, skating event, and they party with them, and then they get up and they've clobbered them. They're overconfident. They may be hungover, and they said very early, This was fascinating to me. A couple of Russian players said, they're faster than us today. Because when they lost in New York, when Team USA, the college kid, lost in New York 10-3, and the game was over, they showed a picture of the locker room after that game. I don't know how they get this footage. And the Russian guys were like, they got to learn to skate with us before they can beat us. I mean, they couldn't even skate with them. And then they play a week or two later, and they were like, first period, they are faster than us. And you just watched it. And then the classic mistake by the Russians, because they never lost. It was almost like a trust fund kid. They'd never had a bad day. When they finally had a bad day, they overreacted. Again, when you grow up and everything's handed to you, or you're dominant and you don't have crisis much, you don't know how to react to crisis. Well, the Russians never lost. So they go in, tied at 2-2 after the first period, a late goal, and they yanked their goalie. He was the best goalie in the world. And so Team USA comes out for the second period, and they're like, what? The best goalie in the world, you pulled him out. And so that was a huge break for the United States that they just freaked out. They overreacted. They basically gave up a goal with about a second left or two on the clock on a rebound right at the end. It's such a magnificent story.
Possession over to Ramsey. The Lebanon gets checked by Ramsey. The puck is still loose. 11 seconds. You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Schultz. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
It's just incredible. And they were saying, and the other thing, the perfect storm was, the Russians had invaded Afghanistan, their government. And so during the event, when the Russians came into the arena, there was very much an anti-Russian intensity, and the Russian players said it was the loudest building we'd ever been in. They were handing out flyers to support Afghanistan. Some of the fans that went, the Russian athletes were like, we thought we were going to get beat up. I mean, it was just this storm of hangover, overconfidence, Afghanistan, intensity. The fans were standing the entire. I can remember being in a bowling alley in rural Washington State, a bowling alley, and I remember the carpet being green. It was quite a bowling alley. And somebody said, did you hear? There was a bar. I couldn't go to it as a kid. There was a bar, and then there was the bowling alley, and there was and there was a door, and you kind of walk through. And I remember somebody coming out saying, we beat the Russians. And I can remember I mean, seriously, there's been like 4 times in my life I remember where I was when the Challenger exploded. I remember being in a blue Cadillac with Larry Kentop, and we were going to the Showboat. It was an account I was in sales. And I can remember CBS News, the Challenger exploded, and we looked at each other. And whenever I've been through one of these kind of like cataclysmic or these monumental events, I remember the colors. And I don't have time to explain it. But I remember USA Hockey, green floor, kind of old wood, Russians lost to us. And everybody
isn't there an orange couch somewhere in there, too?
I've got an orange couch story, yeah. Yeah, I've got an orange couch story. It's a weird thing. Some people remember names, I remember colors. So the Challenger, Team USA, the O.J. Simpson trial was a couch. I was in Tampa, Florida, and I could hear my neighbors cheering during the O.J. Simpson thing. I remember sitting on a couch watching TV, and I remember I didn't have any reaction. I was just like, oh. I mean, I wasn't rooting for anybody. I was like, oh. But I could hear people outside of my apartment building. It was a barnyard musical. It was just crazy. It was just mayhem in the streets. I just kind of rambled there, but I just got caught up in that whole thing, man. You got to watch it. It's called Miracles of Men. It is a fascinating look. It makes the Russians incredibly human. You know, we see them back then. At that time, you know, Russia was all about listen to the government and discipline. It puts a human face on Russia and the Russian player. Well, I mean, that's seriously, you hear this music, that's Russia, like robots. It's incredible how they treated the athletes, too. They follow one guy through this. We don't realize in this country how lucky we are. If you're talented, you will be elevated. And this guy was the first guy. The star of that team was allowed to come play in the United States. It was the first time in the country's history that one of their citizens was allowed to go and perform elsewhere. It is a fascinating Miracles of Men. Tim Legler's around the corner. You're listening to The Herd on ESPN Radio, available in the sports section on the free TuneIn Radio app, The Herd.
Colin Cowherd.
The Thundering Herd Podcast.
Tim Legler joining me in studio. I said this earlier today. I just don't understand it. We had the Oscars yesterday. It's all about collaboration. If Steven Spielberg gets a script, he says, okay, I want to get Hanks, I want to get this, I want to get the producer, I want to get the score. In the Grammys, in music, who's my producer? In the NFL, in baseball, everybody wants to work with somebody. But in the NBA, you get these occasional stars. Derrick Rose won't get on the phone and pitch guys. Melo probably wouldn't do it well. Kobe said this yesterday, the Grantland Basketball Hour, about teaming up with other guys. Go ahead and play the tape.
It just depends on what your philosophy is. Like, I'm not sitting here saying my philosophy is the right way. It's my way. This is how I choose to do it. You know, and some people may agree with it, some people may not. Is it hurting me right now? Yeah. But it's just who I am.
I think he's nuts. So Kobe's whole thing is, I'm not going to get on the phone. I'm not okay, and you're on the worst team, arguably, in the league. Like, I don't know, how do you see it?
I think Kobe's he's one of those guys, and he has talked recently about a rebirth and trying to extend his career by changing maybe the way he plays and being more open to these kind of things so he can be on a relevant basketball team again before he retires. I just don't think it's in his DNA of who he is. He's alpha, man. He is alpha to the max. And he doesn't really conceive of that idea. In fact, he said several years ago, you're not going to see me sticking around at the end of my career averaging 18 points a game. And he made that statement 5 years ago when he was healthy. He made that statement. And now he's actually in that situation. So let's see what he wants to do. I just think he believes you go to a franchise, you stay there. Your job is to elevate that franchise. And if guys want to come there and play with you, so be it. And he ended up with Shaq, and they won 3 titles together.
I think that's so easy to say when you're a Laker.
That's true.
A lot of people don't want to go to Cleveland.
That's true, but I think he looks at a situation like Michael went to the Chicago Bulls. They were not a good team when he got there.
Right.
He went through some lumps early on, couldn't get past certain teams. Finally gets enough talent around him. Pippen becomes a great player, and now all of a sudden here he goes 6 rings in 8 years. And I think Kobe can relate more to that mentality. He didn't go. Jordan could have left as a free agent several times. He didn't. He stayed there. This was my team. You drafted me. I'm going to elevate this team to unprecedented level. And I think that's why Kobe maybe looks at LeBron differently. Like, man, you left Cleveland and went to Miami to chase it to go play with another Hall of Fame player.
By the way, Kobe doesn't get a title if he doesn't have Shaq and Gasol.
I agree with you. I mean, people sometimes forget that, Kobe has 5 rings, and 3 of those you can make an argument he wasn't his own team's best player because Shaq was the Finals MVP of all 3 of those first.
Shaq was more dominant at the time.
And Shaq, Kobe Bryant's a better player than Shaquille O'Neal. Let me make no mistake about that in case anybody's trying to misinterpret what I just said. But for those playoff runs, Shaq was the more dominant player. He was unguardable, unstoppable, and was the Finals MVP of all 3. Now, Kobe then went on to win 2 more, where he was the guy playing alongside Powell. But, he got to play with Shaq. So it's easy to say that when these things happen to you, but I just believe that's his philosophy is, look, this is my team, my organization, my franchise. If you want to come, great. I'm not going to go out there and pitch it and sell it and take a back seat to some other guy that comes in so that I can be, relevant again. He believes he can do it his way and still be relevant again, and obviously that's not going to happen.
But when you live in Bel Air, everybody always wants to come to your parties. It's very easy to say, hey, I'm having a party Friday. Yeah, Bob lives in Bel Air. You're ready to go?
You're right.
When you live in a tougher part of town or you live far away, nobody wants to go. So I've always defended LeBron. It's a lot like if your family's name is Trump or Hilton,
right?
You just got certain advantages. Cleveland is a disadvantage to end up and be drafted by.
Correct.
Well, would we agree on that?
It is.
It's a disadvantage in the NBA.
It is, and I think I don't believe this. I think I agree with what LeBron James did.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, players on that level, when it's all said and done, they're the ones that are going to be criticized when you start looking over the resume and you don't see the title. And he knew that. He knows that. He wasn't going to necessarily get one in Cleveland, even though they were close. They had gotten to a finals when he was very young on a team that had no business being there. And if he stayed, hey, maybe he would have. Maybe he would have won a title.
Or maybe he doesn't.
But maybe not at all. And now maybe he finds himself, early 30s, still haven't won a ring and starting to, almost like panic time. Like, I'm going to be on that list? It's a very short list of guys that are all-timers that didn't win a ring.
Kevin Garnett, remember this, Tim? Remember when Kevin Garnett, once he got to Boston, said, I should have done it years earlier?
Right.
There was a comment once Garnett made to LeBron. It was like, dude, if I was to do it over again, I'd leave. Right. Kevin Garnett, if he's not willing to leave, doesn't have a title. I think the world's changed. Athletes have more power, Tim. Guys like you, you have more power, and I'm all for you using it.
I agree. I am too. I have no problem with it whatsoever. I really don't. I don't have an issue with it.
Kendrick Perkins goes to the Cavs. I said this morning, now with Mozgov and Perkins, the size. I look at this roster, that looks like a championship roster.
They, at times, offensively are unstoppable. They now add a backup physical presence in the lane in Perkins. Mozgov, a legit rim protector. Even, Shumpert. J.R. Smith is a better than average defender. He gets after it defensively.
Who's that, J.R.?
J.R. Smith. We've always, criticized him because his shot selection has been horrific. But now he's on a team where he doesn't have to create offense. Just go shoot threes.
Yeah.
And he's very comfortable doing that. Yeah. And he's also a pretty good defensive player. Add Mozgov, Perkins, Shumpert, also with LeBron, Irving, and Love. I mean, this team right now does have the look of a championship caliber team. And when you look at the East, as good as Atlanta's been, you still kind of go, wow, as good as they've been, and they could win 64, 65 games, and they might be the third best team in the Eastern Conference.
Not just because I spent so much time there. Portland's very interesting. They add Aflalo, and they have Matthews. And
love the Aflalo pickup. We didn't spend enough time talking about the other day.
Seasoned veteran.
Right.
Smart, makes your second unit significantly better.
And play 2-3, scores like a 2, defends at the 2-3 position. So now, with Batum and Matthews and him, you've got a 3-man rotation amongst those positions. Significantly improved their team. It's one of the things I didn't like about Portland. I always thought the bench is kind of thin. If you get into a series and Lillard and Aldridge, they have a bad night, it turns a series if that happens. And now you have another guy that can get you 15-20. If he gets hot, and I think that was a major addition.
Because Batum is a little bit inconsistent, so now you've got Aldridge, Lillard, and Wes Matthews, by the way. There's another guy that he can score 20 points.
And Wes Matthews is a good defensive player, one of the better, both ends of the floor, 2 guards in this league that never gets talked about.
I wonder about Golden State's size. Like, I love the Warriors.
Yeah.
I don't know about that size.
Well, that's definitely going to be the thing. I think when it's all said and done, if they don't get to the finals, that's what we're going to be talking about. They shoot a ton of jumpers.
Yeah.
They live and die by that, which is good.